Maeve Ellington, just 5 years old, stepped barefoot into the fresh morning grass behind her grandmother's old farmhouse. Her yellow dress brushed softly against her knees while the breeze tangled her chestnut hair. She moved slowly but fearlessly toward the wooden doghouse where Jasper, or Moose as Fletcher Rawlins liked to call him, growled loud enough to shake the air. Behind Mave, a half-circle of neighbors had formed in a hush of horror. No one spoke. No one moved. They only watched the blind child walk straight into the storm. Moose was massive for a German shepherd. His black and tan fur rippled as he strained against a thick iron chain. His lips curled back to bare sharp white teeth. Thick ropes of foam hung at the corners of his mouth. Everett Harlow, Maeve's father, stood frozen a few feet behind her, fists clenched at his sides. His mind screamed to run, to pull her away, but his body refused. Beside him, Flora Sheffield covered her mouth, eyes locked on her daughter's outstretched hand, silently begging her to stop. The dog's snarls echoed through the yard and into every heartbeat around. Behind Everett, Tobias Langford and Lawson Crowder exchanged panicked glances. They had come running when they heard Moose's furious barking tearing through the quiet Sunday air. Now they stood still as fence posts, helpless witnesses to a child's fragile courage. Maeve tilted her head, listening to the sound no one else heard. Not the anger in Moose's growl, but the tremor in his chest. In her darkness, she remembered only warmth, not teeth. Moose was her secret friend when everyone else feared him. Jasper lunged so hard the chain rattled against the doghouse. Flora sobbed softly, clutching Iris Whitcomb's arm for strength. Iris squeezed back, whispering a prayer under her breath. Elsie Hardwick wiped tears from her eyes, too afraid to look but too stunned to look away. Maeve's small hand stayed in the air, trembling closer to Moose's snapping jaw. Everett's voice cracked as he begged, "Maeve, please." But she didn't pause. Her trust cut through fear like light through shadow. In a breathless silence, Maeve whispered, "It's me, Moose." The big dog froze, his growl caught in his throat. His ears flicked back, head lowering an inch. Neighbors gasped when Maeve's tiny fingers brushed his fur, soft and warm under trembling fingertips. Moose shivered once, then let out a quiet, confused whine. Everett surged forward at last, gathering Maeve in shaking arms. Behind him, Mabel Kingsley whispered, "Lord have mercy. Did you see that?" Moose sat back, tail sweeping the grass, eyes on Maeve's face as if seeing something the rest of them could not. Around them, the neighbors' fear turned to stunned whispers and quiet prayers. Everett held Maeve close, forehead pressed to hers, but his eyes stayed locked on Moose. He knew in that instant, this bond was not chance. Somewhere behind Moose's eyes, behind Maeve's blindness, lay a truth he could no longer ignore. And that truth would not stay buried for long. The morning after Maeve's quiet miracle, the old farmhouse seemed different. Sunlight touched the porch rails where Everett Harlow sat alone, elbows resting on his knees, eyes fixed on Moose sleeping peacefully near Maeve's swing. The big shepherd, once feared by everyone on Crowder Road, now looked harmless at her feet. Fletcher Rawlins walked up the gravel path, boots crunching like thunder in the soft dawn. He stopped at the bottom step, tipped his hat, and studied Everett's tired face. "Can't sleep?" Fletcher asked, voice low, careful not to wake the child or the dog. Everett shook his head, dark circles beneath his eyes telling Fletcher more than words ever could. Last night's whispers from the neighbors hadn't stopped echoing through Everett's mind. They called it a miracle, some a curse, a few whispered about secrets old as the family name. Fletcher, loyal to a fault, just wanted the truth buried deep to stay where it was. Inside the house, Flora Sheffield watched from behind the curtain. She held Maeve's blanket tight against her chest, trying to keep the chill away. Iris Whitcomb sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of cooling coffee. Iris had seen enough in her 60 years to know when something unspoken was festering inside a family. She turned to Flora and said gently, "Secrets don't stay quiet forever, dear." Flora didn't answer, only stared at her husband outside, wondering if she really knew the man she married. Lawson Crowder and Tobias Langford argued quietly at the fence line. Lawson believed Moose should be taken away before something worse happened. Tobias disagreed. He swore he'd seen something in the dog's eyes last night. Something loyal, protective, maybe broken but fixable. Their voices carried just enough for Everett to hear the tension brewing in his own yard. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, feeling the weight of every lie he'd told to keep this family whole. Meanwhile, Maeve giggled softly in her sleep. She dreamed of running through tall grass with Moose at her side, the darkness behind her and nothing but warmth ahead. Even in sleep, her fingers curled as if still feeling his fur. Moose's ear twitched, nose flaring at every creak of the porch. Fletcher watched them both and muttered to Everett, "A girl like that don't fear the beast because she carries her own." Everett said nothing but deep down. Those words clawed at him like nails scratching an old wound. Far beyond Crowder Road, Mabel Kingsley gathered up her church friends. They spoke in low voices about Maeve's gift, about Moose's sudden calm, about things that shouldn't be possible. As rumors spread through Sheffield Hollow, Everett knew one thing for sure. The questions would not stop. The truth, buried deep beneath porch steps and whispered behind closed doors, would soon come out. And when it did, it would test every promise he had ever made. 2 nights later, thunder rolled low over Sheffield Hollow as Everett Harlow locked the barn doors. The air smelled of rain and secrets. He glanced back toward the house, where Maeve slept under Flora's watchful eye and Moose lay guard at her door. Fletcher Rawlins appeared from the shadow near the old truck, boots sinking into muddy earth. He carried a lantern and an unasked question in his eyes. "Everett, we can't keep dodging this," Fletcher said, voice half buried in the wind. Everett didn't look at him. His hands busied themselves with the rusty lock, but his mind rattled through every lie he'd ever told Flora, every bedtime story he'd whispered to Maeve about bravery instead of betrayal. Fletcher stepped closer. "The neighbors are talking louder now. Lawson says he's calling Officer Harris. If the sheriff pokes around, he'll find what we buried." Inside the warm farmhouse, Flora sat at the edge of Maeve's bed, brushing a loose curl from her daughter's forehead. Maeve stirred, whispering something about Moose running through fields of tall grass. Flora pressed her lips to Maeve's temple, trying to hush her own dread. In the kitchen, Iris Whitcomb and Elsie Hardwick argued in hushed tones about what Flora should do. Iris, with her sharp eyes and sharper truths, warned that Flora had ignored too many signs for too long. Outside, Tobias Langford and Lawson Crowder stood under the carport roof, smoking in the rain. Lawson flicked ash into a puddle, voice harsh. "That dog snapped once, he'll snap again. Miracle or not, Maeve's a child. She won't survive another mistake." Tobias wanted to believe Moose had changed, that Maeve's touch had carved out whatever darkness growled in him. But doubt clung to Tobias like wet clothes, cold and unwelcome. In her sleep, Maeve's hand twitched toward Moose's rough fur. Even dreaming, she felt his restless pacing. Tonight, Moose growled low in his chest, eyes locked on the window. He heard the whispers outside, smelled the fear rolling through the hollow. He knew danger the way old dogs know storms, in the bones first, then in the air. Maeve whimpered, and Moose laid his heavy head on her blanket, guarding dreams she couldn't see. Lightning split the sky as Everett turned to Fletcher, voice hoarse. "If Officer Harris digs, he'll find more than bones. He'll find why Moose is the way he is." Fletcher lowered the lantern, eyes flicking toward the sleeping house. "Then we better pray Maeve never remembers what she saw before she went blind." Somewhere inside the house, Moose lifted his head, growled at shadows no one else could see, a warning that the past was coming for them all. By morning, the rain had washed Sheffield Hollow clean, but left behind the kind of silence that unsettles even the bravest hearts. Inside the farmhouse, Flora Sheffield moved from window to window, peeking through faded curtains, eyes darting to the woods behind the barn. She kept her voice low when she spoke to Iris Whitcomb, who sipped tea like she'd tasted darker secrets before. "If Officer Harris shows up today, Everett better be ready to tell him everything," Iris said, her words slicing straight through Flora's fear. In Maeve's small room, Sunlight spilled onto her bed where Moose, Jasper to everyone else, lay pressed against her side. The big dog hadn't slept all night. His ears twitched at every creak in the hallway, every branch tapping glass. Maeve's tiny hand rested on his collar as if anchoring him to this world instead of the dark one that sometimes whispered through his growls. She dreamed of a door she couldn't open, voices on the other side calling her name. But the loudest was always Moose's soft, protective whine. Outside, Everett stood by the fence line, boots sinking into wet grass. Fletcher Rawlins joined him, face grim under the rising sun. Everett's knuckles were white around the handle of his old shovel, the same one he'd used years ago when burying what should have stayed hidden. Lawson Crowder's got Officer Harris curious now, Fletcher warned. Once the law starts sniffing around, the hollow will eat you alive. Everett, best you decide which truth hurts less. Lawson Crowder wasn't far. He and Tobias Langford leaned against Tobias's pickup at the edge of the drive. Lawson spoke too loud on purpose, wanting Flora to hear. A dog like that don't just snap, Tobias. It learns it somewhere. Ask yourself what made Moose like that. Or better yet, ask Everett before the sheriff does. Tobias spat in the dirt, torn between loyalty and the knot of worry twisting deeper each time he thought of Maeve's tiny hand so close to Moose's teeth. Maeve woke before noon, blinking into a room filled with soft golden light. She called for Flora, her voice small but certain. "Is Moose bad, Mama?" she asked when Flora came rushing in. Flora knelt by the bed, brushing hair from Maeve's damp forehead. "No, baby. Moose loves you more than anything," she lied, tasting the bitterness of secrets trapped behind gentle words. Moose nuzzled Maeve's hand, as if he understood the lie better than anyone. Down the road, Officer Brian Harris parked near Mabel Kingsley's house. He stepped out, badge glinting in the sun, eyes scanning toward the Ellington farmhouse. In his hand was an old report, faded ink, blood on the page, and Everett Harlow's name right at the top. Moose lifted his head back at the farmhouse and let out a low, steady growl, warning the hollow that the past was at the door, ready to knock. Officer Brian Harris didn't knock right away. He stood at the Ellington gate, the faded report in his hand bending under his tight grip. He watched Moose through the fence, the big shepherd standing stiff, tail low, eyes locked on him like he already knew the badge meant trouble. Behind the dog, Maeve's laughter drifted through the cracked kitchen window. Harris breathed deep, tasting the tangled scent of rain, mud, and buried truth. Inside, Flora Sheffield froze when she heard the truck doors slam shut. She motioned for Maeve to stay by the table and hurried to the front porch, Iris Whitcomb shadowing her steps like a ghost that smelled scandal. Harris tipped his hat but didn't bother with small talk. "Morning, Mrs. Sheffield. Is Everett around?" Flora's mouth felt dry. She wiped her hands on her apron, forcing a polite smile that trembled at the edges. "He's out by the barn. Is there something wrong, officer?" Everett heard them before he saw them. Fletcher Rawlins had barely finished warning him that the past never stays dead when Harris's voice cut through the yard. "Everett Harlow, got a few questions for you." The shovel in Everett's hand felt heavier than any lie he'd ever carried. He wiped sweat from his brow, nodded once to Fletcher, then walked toward the porch, boots dragging in soft dirt. Moose stalked beside him, muscles tight under his coat, hackles rising with every step closer to Harris. On the porch, Maeve peeked around Flora's skirt, her small hand patting Moose's head like she owned every heartbeat in his chest. Harris's eyes softened for a split second when they landed on the girl, then hardened again as he turned to Everett. "You want to tell me why there's an old assault report with your name and that dog's name on it? Why folks say he nearly killed a man behind that barn years ago?" Everett's jaw flexed. He had 1,000 answers, none of them good enough to keep Maeve safe. From the fence, Lawson Crowder watched, arms crossed, lips twisted in satisfaction. Beside him, Tobias Langford looked anywhere but at Maeve's blind eyes. He wanted this over, but not like this. Fletcher stepped forward, ready to speak, but Everett lifted a hand, silencing him. "Officer Harris," Everett said, voice raw as gravel. Some things ain't meant for paperwork, but if you really want to dig, you better be ready for what you'll find under that dirt. Maeve tugged Flora's dress, whispering, "Mama, why's Officer Harris so mad at Moose?" Flora's heart cracked as she bent to kiss her daughter's hair. Behind them, Moose pushed closer to Maeve, a quiet growl building in his throat. Harris placed a hand on his holster, eyes shifting from the dog to Everett. Somewhere deep in the hollow, thunder rolled again, as if the land itself braced for the truth finally clawing its way up through old bones and newer lies. The hollow's dirt never stayed still for long, not when secrets had roots as deep as old oak trees. Everett Harlow knew that as he led Officer Harris behind the barn, past rusted tools and the old fence line where Moose once broke free. The sheriff's boots squelched in soft mud, each step pressing the past closer to the surface. Fletcher Rawlins trailed behind them, eyes flicking between Harris's holstered gun and Moose pacing in the yard, whining every few steps. Back at the porch, Flora Sheffield sat Maeve on her lap, rocking her gently while whispering prayers too soft for Iris Whitcomb to hear. Iris stood by the door, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Flora, you should take that child inside. This ain't something her ears need to remember." Flora held Maeve tighter, kissing her forehead. But Maeve lifted her face toward the barn, her blank eyes steady. "Moose is scared," she said, her voice calm as if she could see what none of them could. By the fence, Lawson Crowder and Tobias Langford had moved closer, pretending to fix a post but really listening to every word that floated back on the damp air. Lawson spat in the grass, whispering, "Told you, that mutt's bad news. Always was. Now it's Everett's neck too." Tobias rubbed his chin, doubt clawing at him. He remembered the look in Moose's eyes when Maeve touched him, a look that didn't match the monster everyone else feared. Behind the barn, Harris pointed at a patch where weeds refused to grow. "Here, right? This is where it happened." Everett didn't answer at first. He stared at the dirt, remembering a night of drunken fists, a trespasser's threat, and Moose's teeth sinking deep enough to stop a man who should never have come near Flora and baby Maeve. "You want to dig it up, Sheriff?" Everett rasped. "Be my guest, but what you find won't make sense on no paper." Harris squatted, brushing mud with gloved fingers until something pale poked through. Not bone, but scraps of cloth stained so old they crumbled at his touch. He looked up sharply. "You didn't bury a man out here, did you, Everett?" Everett laughed, raw and humorless. "No corpse, Sheriff. Just the memory of what happens when you threaten a family who got nothing left but each other and a good dog to guard them." At the porch, Maeve slid from Flora's lap and stepped barefoot onto the steps. Moose ran to her, pressing his side to her knees, quivering like thunder was trapped in his ribs. Maeve knelt, hugging his big neck. "It's okay, Moose," she whispered. But deep in the hollow, Fletcher's eyes met Everett's. Both men knowing the law didn't bury the real danger, because secrets never stay quiet, and now they were awake again, scratching at every locked door. That night, the hollow felt heavier than ever. A thick fog rolled over the fence lines and swallowed the light from every porch lamp on Crowder Road. Inside the farmhouse, Flora Sheffield tucked Maeve into bed for the third time, her hands trembling as she brushed damp curls from her daughter's forehead. Iris Whitcomb waited by the door, arms crossed, her eyes drilling holes into Flora's back. "She knows more than she lets on," Iris murmured, but Flora pretended not to hear. Out by the barn, Everett Harlow paced in tight circles while Fletcher Rawlins leaned against a post, watching him break apart in slow pieces. Moose sat at Everett's feet, growling low at the shifting fog. Fletcher lit a cigarette, exhaling smoke that curled into the darkness. "Harris ain't done, Everett. He'll be back with questions, maybe a warrant next time. You ready for that?" Everett didn't answer. He stared at the spot where the sheriff had brushed away old cloth and older nightmares. Closer to the road, Lawson Crowder met with Tobias Langford under the cover of the big maple tree. They spoke in hushed, frantic tones. Lawson wanted to tip Harris off about more, about whispers of how Flora lost her first baby, about the real reason Moose was chained up for so many years. Tobias shook his head, voice tight. "You say anything else, you're signing their death sentence." You think Harris cares about truth? He wants someone to blame, and that dog can't defend himself. Back inside, Maeve lay awake, eyes blank but wide open. She heard everything people thought she couldn't. Voices cracked through the floorboards. Iris scolding Flora, Fletcher cursing softly in the yard, even Tobias arguing down by the road. But above it all, she heard Moose's heart, steady, warm, frightened. She pressed her ear to his side, feeling the tremble deep in his ribs. "Don't be scared, Moose," she whispered. "I'll keep you safe like you keep me." Near midnight, Everett stood at the porch railing, staring into the fog that had swallowed his fence, his barn, his whole damn life. Fletcher flicked his cigarette into the yard, voice hoarse. "You ever think maybe it's time to run, Everett? Pack up Flora and Maeve. Leave Crowder Road behind before the law tears you open for good." Everett almost laughed but couldn't find the breath. He knew the hollow better than anyone. You can run from people, but not from the land that remembers everything. Moose suddenly barked, one loud echo into the fog. Maeve sat up in bed, whispering to the shadows outside her window. In the yard, Everett and Fletcher froze when they heard footsteps crunching over gravel. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. Officer Harris wasn't finished yet, and the hollow, restless, hungry for confession, would make sure no secret stayed buried by dawn. Officer Harris stood just beyond the porch light, boots sinking into the soft earth soaked by the night fog. His badge caught what little moonlight filtered through the heavy mist. Everett Harlow met him at the top of the steps, Fletcher Rawlins a silent shadow behind him. Inside, Flora peeked through the crack in the front door, praying Maeve wouldn't wake up and hear words too sharp for a child's ears. Harris didn't bother with pleasantries this time. He lifted an old manila envelope, the paper nearly limp from rain and sweat. "I got a sworn statement, Everett, from a neighbor who claims your dog didn't just bite a trespasser that night. Says he was trained to attack. Says you hid the man somewhere no one would find him alive or dead. You ready to explain that?" Everett's jaw clenched so tight his molars ached. Fletcher muttered, "Watch your tone, Sheriff. You know damn well who that man was." Upstairs, Maeve sat awake in bed, small fingers twisted in Moose's thick fur. The dog whined, pacing from the window to her side, ears flicking at every muffled shout from the porch. Maeve pressed her cheek to his broad head and whispered a promise too soft for the walls to carry. "I won't let them take you, Moose. I'll remember, I promise." Below, Flora caught the faint sound and closed her eyes, wishing her daughter didn't hear so much. Near the gate, Lawson Crowder and Tobias Langford watched the confrontation unfold like hungry crows circling a fresh carcass. Lawson's mouth twisted into a smug grin. "Told you Harris would dig deeper. Bet he's got a warrant ready by morning. Everett's pride won't save that mutt now." Tobias spit in the dirt, voice low. "You just want to see someone bleed for something you don't understand, Lawson. Careful what you wish for, the hollow eats its own." Everett stepped closer to Harris, so close he smelled the stale coffee on the lawman's breath. That man was scum. He came for Flora. He tried the door when she was alone with Maeve crying in her crib. Moose stopped him the only way he knew. "I buried what he left behind, a piece of myself. If you want to unearth it, go ahead, but don't pretend you're cleaning up this hollow." Harris's eyes narrowed, flicking past Everett to the flicker of Maeve's curtain upstairs. Moose barked, one deep, echoing warning that rattled the porch boards. Maeve's voice floated down through the floorboards, clear and small. "Moose didn't do wrong, Sheriff. He saved Mama. He saved me." For a heartbeat, every sound died. The wind, the frogs by the creek, even the shifting fog seemed to pause. Then Harris lowered the envelope, eyes hard with a choice he knew would follow him forever. And deep in the hollow, the truth trembled, moments from breaking free. The fog lifted at dawn, but the heaviness clung to every fence post, every whisper behind locked doors. Flora Sheffield hadn't slept a minute. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at Maeve's empty chair. Iris Whitcomb poured 2 mugs of black coffee, sliding one across the scarred wood. If Harris charges Everett, you'll lose everything. The farm, Moose, your good name. Flora didn't flinch. Her eyes were hollow caves where tears had dried up hours ago. Out in the yard, Everett Harlow leaned against the barn wall, watching Moose trot circles around Maeve. The girl laughed as if the world hadn't cracked wide open last night. Fletcher Rawlins stood near the fence, shotgun resting against his leg, eyes sweeping the tree line for neighbors with loose tongues. Everett's voice was a gravel scrape. She doesn't know what's coming, Fletcher. And when she remembers that night, all of it, I don't know what that'll do to her. Near the road, Lawson Crowder cornered Tobias Langford beside Tobias's old pickup. Lawson's voice hissed like a snake in tall grass. Sheriff's got enough to take the mutt. Maybe the kid, too, if she keeps running her mouth about that night. Folks want quiet, not Ellington family drama dragging them down. Tobias slammed his fist against the hood, metal ringing through the dawn. You're poison, Lawson. If you push Harris, you'll ruin that child's life, not just Everett's. Up on the porch, Maeve sat cross-legged, Moose pressed to her side. She stroked his fur in slow, steady circles, her voice soft and clear. I remember now, Moose. I remember the man. I remember Mama crying and you growling. You didn't hurt me. You saved me. Flora stepped outside just in time to hear her daughter's confession to the dog no one else trusted. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the railing to stay upright, a sob fighting free after all this time. Officer Harris pulled into the drive, tires crunching over gravel still wet from last night's mist. He stepped out slow, hand hovering near his holster but eyes on Maeve. Fletcher raised a hand in warning but said nothing. Everett stood between Harris and the porch like a stubborn old oak. Harris's voice broke the morning quiet. Everett, I need your girl's statement. And I need that dog restrained until we sort this out. If you fight me on this, you'll lose everything. Moose growled, low and steady, the sound vibrating through Maeve's small hand. She stood, tiny shoulders squared against the grown men deciding her fate. No, she said, voice stronger than any law or rumor. You don't take Moose. He's my eyes when it's too dark. He's my safe place. Harris hesitated, the hollow around him so silent it roared in his ears. One last truth waited to be spoken, and by sundown, it would decide whether Moose stayed a hero or vanished like so many secrets before him. Sunlight broke through the trees for the first time in days, slicing shadows into ribbons across Crowder Road. Flora Sheffield stood on the porch, arms wrapped around Maeve, who pressed her ear to Moose's strong heartbeat. The dog lay at her feet, calm but alert, as if he knew the whole hollow had gathered to decide whether he'd stay or go. Beside Flora, Iris Whitcomb whispered, once secrets crawl into daylight, they don't go back under easy. Flora didn't answer. She just held her daughter tighter. Out in the yard, Everett Harlow faced Officer Harris alone. Fletcher Rawlins hovered at Everett's shoulder, shotgun resting across his forearms like a promise. Harris had a clipboard now, but his eyes kept drifting to Maeve's small frame beside Moose. He cleared his throat, voice softer than before. Your girl says that dog saved her life. Says he never turned on her. That matches part of the old report. But there's still the matter of the missing man. Everett swallowed hard. The truth stuck in his throat like a stone. He pointed a tired hand toward the old garden shed behind the barn. I never buried a body. I buried the man's boots and bloody jacket to stop the neighbors from poking around. He ran limping into those woods, never came back. Maybe he died, maybe he didn't. I protected my family the only way I knew how. Harris studied Everett's lined face, weighing the truth against the silence expected in Sheffield Hollow. Near the fence, Lawson Crowder shifted uncomfortably when Tobias Langford stepped close, voice low and sharp. You got what you wanted, Lawson? Satisfied seeing Maeve dragged through dirt she never should have remembered. Lawson started to speak, but Tobias cut him off with a glare that silenced him better than fists. Go home. Let the hollow breathe again. You stir it more, it'll swallow you next. Maeve turned her blind eyes toward Harris's footsteps crunching closer. She held Moose's collar tight, her small voice steady. Please don't take him. He didn't hurt me. He makes the dark feel smaller. Harris knelt down to her level, something gentle flickering in the sheriff's tired eyes. Maeve, sometimes the law don't fit where it should. Sometimes the hollow knows best. He rose, turning back to Everett and Fletcher. Keep him chained at night. Keep him close. And keep your family close too. I won't come back if you don't give me reason. The morning settled like a held breath finally released. Flora sank to her knees, arms around Maeve and Moose together. Fletcher laid a steady hand on Everett's shoulder. Lawson slunk away into the woods, nothing left to say. Tobias lingered, watching Maeve scratch Moose's ears, her laughter chasing off every ghost Sheffield Hollow had buried. And in that fragile sunlight, the Hollow forgave, for now, the old sins it kept hidden under oak roots and whispered prayers.